because of the first charge around. So I mean those simple.
Yeah, but why should he defend such?
Sure. I mean, what I'm saying, that was an idea that came to mind.
Okay, I totally agree with him.
I was just interested in Yari and giving him all those skills. If he needs somebody to answer any anime question he has.
Okay, sounds good.
That's
Okay, we'll do. Yeah, and he was talking with me. He will bring some new work to Anima. Yeah, they are proposed something called PAP protocol, but that's very very similar to at least everything is proposed. We can do it, but anyway.
It's not always a good thing. Like people wanting to do something new, run into people who already have it.
Yes, but he Robin already accepted that and said he will bring their use case to Anima next time.
Okay.
So that's.
So while you were running away, Ignace was saying you really need to put before the IED looks at it, the milestones in. So I need to send out emails to all the authors and say something like, I'm very much hoping that you're fine if we're assuming that within 4 IETF cycles.
Okay.
Right, I mean something like that. Basically, be a little bit, proactive.
Yeah.
Trying to make sure the authors.
Yeah. Sounds good. Sounds good. Should we start? It's time.
You're giving the spiel. I'm doing the slides. I'm just a PowerPoint.
Yeah, good. Oh, what time? Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Did I touch it?
If I didn't. It works fine.
All right.
He wouldn't have handed it to you if he wouldn't want the paint. So I think I'm taking the wrong location
Yeah. You can go for material. Tuesday.
Is there something left? No, you have correctly everything that we should do now. Is here.
Yeah. You still need to go for the chair slides first. Yeah. Okay, we're 2 minutes late. So let's start. This is the anima session, the second session for dedicated for Bresky relevant stuff. So what we got, okay, still not well. Everybody should read it and behave well. And before we start, we have Jibber. Michael, could you do that again? Jibber. And means taker. Thanks, Gong Hong. And all the slides already uploaded, and the most mailing list should be the main working place. And this working group chaired by me, Xing, and Teres. This is the agenda for this afternoon. We have the Brisky update first. That's something we already sent to the ISD and still have a few blocks there, but hopefully it will go well. And then we have the constraint voucher, also made by Michael Richardson. And then after that, it's constraint joint proxy for Brisky protocols by Peter. Then that's support for synchronizing Izomint in Brisky done by Elite. And then that's the ACME integrating with Brisky by Owen. Any agenda bashing? Once, twice, go. So, Michael?
Hello? Okay.
The PowerPoint monkey is slow. You can use the clicker if you like. It should work. Otherwise, say next slide.
Hi. Good afternoon. Guten Abend? No, that's good morning. Trying to learn German. Anyway, so I've been working on the Anima bootstrapping key infrastructure documents, otherwise known as Brewski. And we are been in the ISG review for some time. That does not work. Next slide. There we go. So I thought it was. There's no way. First of all, if you would like to talk about some of the topics that are part of the discuss, well, I would be happy to discuss it with you, but I'm sure we don't have time today. It went into ISG call on, I believe it was June 13th, and there were a great number of discusses posted on June 12th, 10th, 11th, 12th. Which arrived, and I started to, I'm sorry, it went into the review on July 11th, not July 10th. And there was a number of calls that came through there, a number of discusses. So there were 6 substantive discusses plus about 3, oh, by the way, I'm posting no comment or what was the right words? Anyway, the opposite of discuss. But here's some comments anyway. Okay, and then several abstains people who said, and I also agree with so and so's discussed. So there was a lot of stuff. So I've gone through the bulk, 6.5, 5.5 of the 6 discusses, and I have some substantive comments from Ben Kuduk left to do. Adam Roach has indicated to me by email yesterday that he does not feel his discusses have been dealt with, so there will be more discussion about that. Your comments on the mailing list would be much appreciated to understand what's going on. Christian Wiedema posted a revision to his review at the beginning of June. I didn't see it until I was asked why I didn't solve his problems. So from what I can tell from having reviewed it, I believe that all of his issues overlap with Adam and Ben's comments. And so I'll either solve them in one group or I won't. I am hoping to finish those comments probably tonight. I'm not going to the social. And post a new version by the end of the week, which I hope will be it. And if not, I will spend some time with the appropriate area directors trying to understand what's going on directly. Next slide, please. We have been doing interop testing of Brewski, mostly between myself and a team from Siemens, and some people that are working with them from the ZHAW, which is the, Elliot might get it for me, Zurich University of Technology, something like this. We meet most Tuesday mornings to basically exchange log entries and see what happened with our online test pieces. In the process of doing that, we discovered that we didn't have a common understanding of which parts of RFC 7030 were base 64 encoded, and whether that was optional, mandatory, or unwanted, and whether or not Brewski had the same behavior, right? And to make it worse, some of us had coded things that we didn't realize that we had coded it that way, so we were confused by our own situation. The result is that RFC 7030, which is EST, which Brewski is a protocol, an extension of, has some confusion. And there was a document and a presentation at SecDispatch yesterday on clarifying that. And that document, I believe they have concluded, will go to the LAMPS working group, which is the kind of successor to PKIX, to do this. Your comments would be appreciated of that, particularly if you have an EST implementation or intend to write one as part of Brewski, so that you can do this. It doesn't look like we can do anything other than say, this was clearly wrong, but it's how it is, so you should cope with it and not be confused. Next slide, please. So that's just a little bit about the interop that has happened so far, and I've already mentioned that. Go on. And that's it for Brewski. Questions? Yeah, there are no more slides. My co-author, Max Pritikin, has been given a task that he could not say no to. You've been complaining for several years, and now your opportunity to fix it. So shut up or do something. And so that's why you haven't seen a lot of him. But we actually do chat almost every week about this. You just won't see much of him, his conscious self. So I'll go on to the next part about constrained. The button, yeah. So Peter Panos and I have been working on this document since a while. There's not a lot of substantive changes to the core of the document. We updated some examples of COS-signed CBOR, and Jim Schott ran it through his COS implementation and found that they were wrong. So it's probably as important to find out that they were right. Still trying to figure out exactly where they're wrong at this point, but we'll get that right, and we'll have to update those examples again. I have validated Peter's CMS signed example, and that's okay. I don't know what this word variety is in there. Some spell checking has got me yesterday. Most issues reported by various people, I think it's supposed to say, have been resolved. I did introduce this leaf node pin SHA-256 of subject of public key info. And its utility is still under dispute, and I would sure like some comments about that. We can make really long leaf names because they get translated to an integer anyway, so don't worry about that kind of thing in there. And with the working group's kind of active review of this, I think we could reach working group last call before IETF 106 on this. Next slide, please. Draft IETF core SID, they have more or less been statically written into the file. We believe that we can generate them correctly with Piang now, but more or less we're not being overly optimistic about it being consistent because the code is still not accepted upstream, and we had some conversations of this. So there's a Piang extension that lets us translate the RFC 8366 voucher model to CBOR, and it's an automated fashion. I'm told that the core working group will have the SID documents in working group last call any day now, but come to the core meeting and find out. That's it.
So the area director asked me to figure out that we update our milestones. From what I heard, could I assume that we're trying to target getting this over to ISG before 107?
Sure. Cool. I would say I think we could be more aggressive than that. I think we could say get it out of IES. I think we could get it out of IESG before 107.
That's not my responsibility.
I know that's not your responsibility.
You're just talking to a working group chair who just wants to enter milestones.
So I think that the right answer is submit it to IESG right after 106. Mm-hmm. So working group last call, I think we could do that we could be finished that by 106, and so that you could put it into IESG review there. That for this document, this does require. I think it would be helpful to have someone else who might implement the voucher part particularly.
Did you just say you could do, enter the IESG and get out in one IETF meeting cycle? I don't think so.
It's not more than 100 pages. Yeah.
So as you said, it's about when you give it to them, but based upon what I've seen so far, they are processing many drafts in less than that, but maybe not all drafts. So I don't know. Maybe you need to buy more scotch for Thursday.
How long time we take for ACP? Maybe 4 or 5 IETF meeting.
It's exponential with the number of slides.
Yeah. So it is true that longer documents are harder to deal with. But I would also say that it depends on this. There should be no political discussion about this document because we're just re-encoding Brewski into some other thing. Mm-hmm. So I hope that will be easier to discuss.
Right, so it won't become RFC before Brewski's RFC, normative dependency?
Well, there is that point anyway, so there you go. Thank you.
Give me, I'll try to figure out if I can make it work.
Thanks for the slides. We were just in time. Okay, I will talk about the constraint joint proxy, something which is done together with Michael. And please, the next slide. So it tells you it is a continuation of the Brewski work. It's a translation. It talks actually about the joint proxy. Please go on. We have done this already in the last clip. So on graphic explanation of what goes on, we have the Brewski, we have the pledge, which wants to be entered into the network. We have a proxy which he can contact, link locally, and then he can, over the global internet, he can contact the domain registrar. And instead of doing that HTTP TLS, we do that is co-op DTLS with vouchers in Young, and there is less problems with this base 64, I think. Okay. So, straightforward document. Compared to the former document version of the document, what I did, I simplified it by having the stateful server. I removed the number of possibilities. There's only one now. And I promised to do something about the discovery. And actually I did it. And so we'll talk about that. Next one, please. So we have two versions for the joint proxy, which was actually demanded by one of the people who are starting to implement it. One is a stateful and a stateless. The stateful, which keeps in the joint proxy, it keeps the addresses of the pledge, so that when the answer comes back, he knows where to send it. And the stateless is less information in the joint proxy, so this information is stored in the packet. Yeah. Next one. If there are any questions, please speak out loud now. So the discovery is one of the parts which maybe will provoke a discussion. So what we have is that we use co-op, and then we look at the pledge and the joint proxy. This will be a link local, probably mostly on the mesh. It can be on other things, but for the moment, we think of using this on the mesh and link locally. So how will the pledge discover the joint proxy? By doing co-op discovery, which is explained in the document and is also explained in the resource discovery, etc. And there is this 6-dish which uses the enhanced beacon, and Michael can explain that if needed. And then further on, that if we go to the global one, we will get either we use the ANI grasp one, if it is actually this environment supports it. If not any ANI, then there will be done co-op discovery. Is there anyone who thinks that more should be done or less discoveries? Brian, you're happy? Yes? Okay, great. Then
I'm not sure how you're on time. If there's a quick explanation, multi-hop co-op discovery, is that working? Is that?
Yeah, you can do. So what you can do is two things. You can send a multicast with co-op discovery, which is discouraged, and you send to well-known core, and then all the ones which feel yes, we can do this, we send you an answer. It's discouraged. The other thing which we have is a resource directory.
Okay.
So the resource directory is a central one. You can send a unicast and it will send you back all the devices which have this particular service in its memory. And then you can approach the one which you want to select.
And there's dynamic registration for the registrars
Yeah,
with
yeah,
the
yeah,
directory. Yeah.
If you know Bonjour, it works with multicast,
Okay.
and it has the
There's also
DNS
directory,
service
yeah.
records. This one actually is different. It uses the URIs, and it looks at, so it's not the host names, etc., but it's URIs, and it is, let me think, it can do filtering where the DNS is. Yeah. Let's go on. So this is about the packet format for the stateless, because for the stateful it is straightforward. So what we will do, and this is a bit original. So first, when the plate sends the join proxy, you have the link local addresses and you have the DTLS payload. And you don't want the join proxy to look at the DTLS payload, so it sends this on completely. And what it does, it stores the addresses for the link local addresses. And for that, we use multipart core. And I have to point out that this is a new media format, which is done in core, and which is also used in the constrained voucher draft, which has been proposed just the former speaker. So that it is stored there, and then it goes back. Down below, I have an example of what it looks like. So you have a CBOR array, and in the CBOR array, you first put in what is the format of the next item. In this case, it is an array of 2 identities, and then there is the next one which tells you that it is the format which was used in the standard EST, and then it gives you the DTLS content. Yeah. No IP in IP. I think Michael has tried that before, but it is more complex. You have a lot of larger headers, etc. And well, this is rather locally done, and it is shorter. Yeah. Next one. I showed this one before, which is what the addition is here, that for the constrained join proxy, I've added that it actually uses the multipart CT draft, which was also used in the voucher. So that is a difference with the same table which I showed 3 months ago, if anybody remembers. Yes, apparently. Any questions? Then I have seen that in the new draft, in the new charter, the name is mentioned. So I'm looking forward to the acceptance of the new charter, and then later on a working group acceptance of this document.
Yeah, as far as the milestones, even for the stuff, or especially for the stuff that is meant to be first adopted and is on the list there, we've been asked to come up with milestones. So we've basically been thinking that adoption could hopefully start before 106, pending on IAB, not sleeping at the wheel. And so, what do you think? How much work would be left from that point on?
This thing is now reasonably complete. I was very much worried about the discovery, but I don't hear too many oppose it, none actually. So I think it is rather well advanced, unless somebody finds some major mistakes. So say the whole approach is wrong.
Yeah. So can I ask how many people have read the draft? No, wait. I'm not that slow. I'm not that fast. I am that slow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Thank you. 8. Okay.
You counted me?
Yeah. No, it's been a long time, so I don't even remember anymore. It was very early on, so I need to reread it. Okay. Cool.
Fine.
So, I mean, authors don't count, so it's yeah.
No more remarks, questions. Congratulations, encouragements. Okay.
Okay. So, next.
Let's take my notes here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Take your time. Walk slowly. Where the heck? Yeah, wait a second.
All right. Hi, everybody. It's Elliot. I am talking here about something called Brewski AE. We have this locked up.
It's data tracker meditation. Okay.
Oh.
Tuesday afternoon. Here we go. And once and,
Yeah.
and almost there. This one here?
Yep, that's the one.
Let's check this one then.
All right, so I'm presenting today on behalf of my co-authors, Stefan Fries and Hendrik Brockhaus, who are the major drivers of this draft. I'm the least major driver of this draft. Next slide, please. We're talking about, in this context, is a draft, and I think there might have been one before this. Is that right? Yeah, yep, thank you. So this draft is misnomered. It's not really a Brewski problem that we're attempting to address, but there's a little bit of a trick in EST that we wanted to highlight with regard to some asynchronous enrollment issues. So the issue that this, and I think this draft was presented last time, so I'm going to be relatively quick. The fundamental issue here is what happens if the CA in some form or another is detached from the joint registrar and is unable to issue certificates at any given moment in time. Now, it turns out EST and RFC 7030 anticipates this problem a little bit in terms of being able to take to allow for various return codes. However, I'm pretty sure that our implementations haven't anticipated this in pace of at the same pace. And so this draft addresses the asynchronous nature that may occur, where you want to have essentially a fully encapsulated and self-sufficient certificate request with a fully encapsulated, and I'm talking about a PKCS7 request with a PKCS7 response. Next slide, please. So there have been a couple of changes from the previous draft. We've updated the examples because I myself didn't understand the darn thing in terms of how this would work in building automation, which is where a lot of the work is focusing on. And this is definitely one of those cases where you have intermittent connectivity, and so having a mechanism to address the certificate enrollment in that environment is very important. What we've also done is a bit of a mapping to the various enrollment protocols. So when Mr. Fries first started this draft, he looked at this somewhat in the abstract, and I said, well, that's just too abstract for me because I don't think so abstractly. And so he has now done the mapping of this into two different protocols, and we'll go through that. There's the architecture picture is a little bit crisper, and we've removed a bit of gunk. And so next slide.
The clicker is actually working. Try, please.
Okay, very good. Next slide, Elliot.
Maybe
Okay, apparently it's not. Oh, there it goes.
No, but that was me.
Has it? Okay, so.
maybe that's because the power it seems distance work.
Oh, okay, well,
No?
here's the X. X marks the spot. So the asynchronous enrollment in terms of self-contained objects. So the key thing here is that we need for the proof of possession, the private key in terms of corresponding to the public key, as it says here, to be self-contained. And we need an indication, essentially, when a request goes out to in EST that I would like a certificate, please. The essential point here is that the join registrar has to be able to say, to respond, no soup for you, come back in, well, some period of time. And I think, in fact, that's mentioned in the draft. Now, if you guys don't know the reference of no soup for you, that's Jerry Seinfeld and a particular character there. When he gets annoyed, he tells somebody no soup for you. In this case, the annoyance is with the fact that the CA is not present. So no soup for you, come back for your certificate request, for your certificate response in some period of time. This means, by the way, that you have to have a certificate request that is serialized such that the client can remember all this fun stuff. Peter.
Hi, Peter van Stok. In the EST Co-op S draft, we were also looking at this problem.
Yeah.
Don't know, is it the same problem?
Probably.
Okay, fine. Well,
So
then we can help each other.
That's right. So the point of this draft, actually, what becomes of this draft is something we need to discuss, because it's clear that there's at least some guidance here for 7030. There's probably additional text that the constrained EST co-op draft needs to take a good stare at to make sure you have your return codes correct in terms of how you're managing those. Since it's full RESTful interface, I don't think that should be a problem, but you may need to apply a little bit of guidance from this draft into that draft, and that would be sufficient because we're not calling for a whole lot in this draft, except, as you'll see, that we're asking for one particular thing that you'll have to check in terms of COSE to make sure that it looks good. Okay, next slide. So, all right, so I think that this diagram probably didn't come out correct, but this is just a recap. I'm not going to go through all of this because you know it all. Next slide.
That was still correct in PowerPoint?
I hope it is.
Yeah.
That one looks better. Okay, so this diagram is updated. This is in the draft. And you can see clearly that what we've done here is we separated out the join proxy from the LRA. And that is really the key to all of this, is that there, and whenever you see either an LRA or a CA, there's this idea that one or the other may not be available at any particular point in time. Now, it's already well anticipated that the MASA may not be available at some point in time, but the idea that the LRA is not available at any particular point in time, that's something that at least the code doesn't test right to in some cases, from what I hear. So next slide, please. All right, so here's the mapping that was done. So for EST, for this to work, what we need is a full CMC request. And you need to make sure that you're returning a 202 status when the LRA is not available. And that's because there are times when, as you see there, the PKCS10 has to be regenerated if there's a teardown event. Similarly with CMP, pretty much this capability is already available if you're using CRMF, so there's nothing to do. And so there's also a cert waiting indication available, as I understand it, in CMP already. So again, there's nothing to do. And so for EST, the key thing here is that you can't use the simple request, which people sometimes use in order to do this. You need a full CMC. And so that's the key thing that Stefan Fries would call out. And the reason for that is that the request has to be self-contained, and that you're relying on the identity of the signer in the full CMC rather than anything else for authentication. Michael.
Michael Richardson. So we have specified simple enroll in both Brewski and constrained Brewski.
Yep.
And couldn't say that I don't really know what full CMC does. That is different, but based on what you just said and put on the slide, I know even less about what it's different, because CSRs are signed by the entity. So I never really understood that, to be honest.
The voucher request is signed.
Oh, no. When you post a CSR on your simple enroll, you post a CSR.
Yeah, it's yes.
It's a PKCS10. So I don't understand what I never understood what full CMC did other than add more ASN1 GU. So I'm going to say I'm just ignorant of not understanding that at all. So perhaps you could motivate us more to understand what it is that you think tell us what it is lacking, because I'm not understanding what it's lacking.
So my understanding is there are two things that are lacking. And it's Stefan who's going to have to answer this in email more so than me. I'm just representing him. The first thing that is lacking is that there's no serialization for the request available in the simple enroll, so that you can't keep track of the request on one side or the other. And that's one thing that he identified.
So if I need to be off, if something is offline, I've sent you something and you sent me back, here's your drink voucher. Okay. Come back, go to the guy at the end of the line and get your certificate, right? That's what's lacking.
What's lacking very specifically is how do I match up the request with a response?
Because they're not in order.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's some of that. And the second thing that is apparently lacking is some amount of identity information in the request. And that's why that's what full CMC is for, is to provide the additional identity information, signing it in the IDEV ID in particular.
So at the risk of causing more delay, if this is as serious as you say, then I believe that Brewski should be changed to specify full CMC.
This isn't a Brewski problem.
It's an EST problem.
Yes.
But the point is that EST defines these two things.
Yes.
And Brewski says you may implement, you'll be compliant if you implement this subset of EST.
Okay. Then we need to investigate that.
And so that's what I'm saying is it was, well, okay, so we need to say you need to be this other subset, right? Simple enroll will not be enough. And
in this use case, in this particular use
in this
case.
particular use case. So it may be enough to say that in an additional use situation, you need full CMC. Okay. No delay
and
required.
we can make this thing be an update to Brewski. So I'm trying.
Well, I think that this thing will be anyway, exactly. But I'm just trying to think about how much changes are required to each component by this, and if it's something that it was, blue or orange, and we picked blue, and orange solves the problem, and there's only two or three implementations out there, and maybe we've implemented orange as well anyway, then we should just say do orange and forget about blue.
But blue has been running this 5-year marathon is shortly before the finish line, and you don't want to have it change its shirt color right now.
So to be clear, right, there's a lot of mechanism here where you don't need full CMC. There are a lot of use cases where you don't need full CMC.
Okay, I have never, from reading the specifications, had any understanding of what full CMC did other than give you lots of extension points that no one implemented. Okay. That's always been my observation. It's like, well, that's cool. That's a, Mr. Inspector Gadget hat, blue, 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 and I just wanted a knife. Thanks.
Right. So no, I actually think that what this is, if we need to update, then we update. But what I was hoping for more, and maybe the one word change would be there's a minimum set that you can implement with Brewski, and if you have to implement for these particular use cases, then you do the full CMC instead. So what I was really hoping for was more of a BCP or something along those lines, where you essentially say, here's how you do this with Brewski, here's how you do this with EST, and actually there aren't any protocol changes needed in those particular cases. So it could be that if you want to tweak a word or two to allow for that possibility, now's a good time to do that, right? And then this can come out as some sort of BCP.
But I mean, you're implementing something. What do I need to implement? That's a standards and track question. So Brewski right now says CSR, which is fine, which doesn't solve all the use cases. We figure out somewhat later this thing fully. We make it an update. That's an additional thing. I don't know if there is such a big difference in the actual coding to support both of these messages, and just further, convoluting the existing Brewski with something which might have been a better choice maybe when we started out, but so late in the process, changing that again, I'm not sure how useful that is. So
I'm not sure what you're saying at this point, Carlos. Are you suggesting that? I'm not saying that we delay the process. Right. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if Michael's got the document before him and there's a 1 or 2 word tweak that would satisfy this, he should think about putting in a 1 or 2 word tweak. That's all.
I'm not only worried about the documents, but I think Michael has also indicated that there is a good of community of people already working or having implementations, and I'd like to take that into account as well. And I'm not sure that, well, I mean, I was going to ask this at the end, which is basically what do we think is the timeline of this thing. But in the first place, what actually is the no-soup policy? Is the no-soup policy something like come back in 10 minutes, or you don't get it now, try to figure out when you can try it again? You have to poll. How does this work?
Right. So I think there's I don't have the draft in front of me at the moment, but I think what it says is here's the time period in which you should retry.
Okay, so it is the come back in 10 minutes or 1 hour.
In 10 minutes. So your joint registrar is available, but your LRA is not available. Please come back and try again when the LRA is once again available. So
what's the system design by which the LRA, the local one, would actually know that delivery of certificates is available in 10 minutes or 10 hours?
They may not know the exact timing, but they may implement a back-off algorithm, like the joint registrar might implement a back-off algorithm on its side. Okay. So the idea would be, well, I'm a building, I'm under construction, connectivity is spotty, or whatever the case may be. Back off and determine if it's a short-term failure, long-term failure, and eventually devices get registered, and then it'll also be based, you can also base it on load. And the idea is you don't have to do a full request again, you can just do the, are you there?
Are you going into details like that, the LRA might need to have persistent storage because, the time when the request comes in and before the reply, it might have been rebooted itself. It seems like...
Not so much the LRA, but the join registrar, right?
Wasn't it the LRA?
It's the join registrar that is available. The LRA doesn't need to retain that sort of state.
The pledge has connectivity only to the LRA, right? And the PKIRA at the bottom, that's the one remotely not available.
Okay. I think he's mislabeled this.
Okay.
But yeah, the point is that your PKI access is essentially hamstrung.
Right. But I'm saying that this local thing that's always available, or maybe not even that always available, I'm saying, right, if this whole thing is about not only interrupted network connectivity, but also interrupted operations of things on site, I'm just wondering how much more we should say not only about the protocol stuff, but also the node behavior to create a reliable system, right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. So to wrap this up, we think that the use case is really valid. That much I'll say. It's absolutely necessary that we understand that intermittent connectivity will happen for some of these use cases. This addresses one particular component that we previously looked as an internal component to the join registrar, which we're externalizing, right? And so in externalizing it, we need to make sure that first of all, that the join registrar is in a position to say come back, which we have the text there to do that. That the certificate request and the certificate request itself can be passed forward to the CA when it's available, and then responded to in a timely manner when the CA comes back online. And the key thing here, right, is that depending on the timing, right, the CA may be online when the device isn't, and vice versa. And that's a use case that we have to be able to handle as well.
And I mean, these things typically end up being something where people may want to ask for a sequence picture of these things. When is this up and this up? So these minimum examples to justify whatever complexity we're adding in the system.
Right. So my proposal then is that we adopt this as follow-on work to Brewski, and then we can decide as we're going through the follow-on work whether it updates Brewski or whether it's its own thing.
Well, I mean, I think it would always be an update to Brewski. I think the update question is really, is it going to add full CMC as another option that a Brewski implementation should do, or is it replacing the CSR with full CMC?
I think, yeah. So my gut tells me we should not replace. But that's, I think, a discussion that the working group should have.
If we have critical mass of ongoing implementations, then we shouldn't. I think so too. Yes.
So with that having been said, right, that's a discussion for the working group. And what I ask is that if we can consider adopting this, I think it would be useful, in the next, and so that the working group can start work on it in the next cycle. This presumes that the Brewski draft is approved. Well, that actually, even if the Brewski draft isn't approved, we probably want to look at this in the context of, what about EST alone? But I'm presuming that
which Brewski draft adoption are you talking about?
What I said was, I'd like to see this draft adopted, please, if the working group has interest, but of course that presumes that draft ANIMA bootstrapping remote key infrastructure is approved by the ISG, right? Because otherwise, what would we do with this draft?
Okay, I think, yeah.
So, yeah, okay.
Trying to sneak through to the mic.
Hi, Ignas.
Ignas Bogdanas. So the status of the Brewski draft is that there was a question raised when ISG, are the is IAG fundamentally against all of this, or just the problems that, specific problems that I identified need to be fixed? And it's the problems that need to be fixed. So you have a big list of discussers that needs to be addressed, and that is going somehow. Not fast, but that is moving. So once that is resolved, the document is approved. So it's not a question that there is a fundamental opposition to the Brusky itself.
I didn't mean to state that there is. It's just I was thinking the matter of timing more than anything else.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So if,
no.
Just to ask, if once Brusky is approved, if we could start the adoption process for this, I would appreciate that.
Sure. Who is not an author and has read this document? One. Okay, yeah, that's fine. One, two, three. Okay, 3 people. Yeah, please 4. Okay, yeah, please read it if you're interested in the use case.
Okay, thank you.
I'm taking my time as well. Sorry, not intentionally, but just. This one. It's the only one we have on offer left.
So what we're looking at here, there's a few use cases we're trying to solve. What we're trying to solve is end-to-end enrollment of certificates on hardware endpoint devices all the way back to the CA. So this draft, the summary is, well, we've lots of time, so I don't need to run through the summary too fast, but the ESG, which David just briefly defines the mechanism by which an endpoint exchanges CSRs and signed certificates with the RA, but the ESG doesn't define the mechanism by which the RA talks to the certificate authority. ACME defines a protocol that a CA and an applicant can use to automate the process of cert issuance. And what this draft covers, well, it covers multiple use cases, but one is how an EST RA can turn around and use ACME in its backends to fully automate end-to-end cert issuance all the way to the CA. There should be no changes required to the existing ACME, EST, or Brusky drafts, but some stuff is probably underspecified. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Sorry, can I ask? Is it because I thought that it was also possible to use EST from RA to CA, but maybe I'm mistaken on that.
Well, if you read the EST spec, it explicitly says it's out of scope.
Okay, it's out of scope.
It could be
okay.
EST, but how the RA talks to the CA is out of scope of the EST draft.
Okay. And so you specifically want to go with ACME? Is there a justification coming? Or
Well,
just
because ACME it's the only public standard for automating cert issuance to a CA.
Okay, cool.
So we have goodness in IETF in the ACME working group.
Yeah,
we have
fine.
goodness here. It's stitching to do together, but there are gaps that need to be addressed if you want to do that. So there's multiple different use cases in the draft. The first one is important: ACME issuance of subdomain certs. So for those that are familiar with ACME, if you read the ACME specification, it describes how a client will prove ownership of an identifier, and then the ACME draft will issue a certificate with that identifier built into it. What's actually ambiguous in the draft, and we discussed this in the ACME working group yesterday, is it's possible for a client to prove ownership of a domain and for the ACME server to issue certificates against a subdomain of that domain. So it's possible with the draft for a client to prove ownership of a parent domain and then get issued many certs for subdomains off that parent domain without having to prove ownership of all the explicit subdomains. That's standard process for public CAs today. And there was consensus in the ACME working group yesterday that yes, we do need to formally document that ACME process so that we can formally document that a CA authority running ACME can require a client to prove ownership of parent domain and then issue multiple certs against subdomains without requiring further ownership challenges. The draft covers multiple different client device integrations, and it's built on top of the subdomain certs. And the subdomain cert stuff is really an optimization. It cuts out all the challenges and cuts out a lot of DNS traffic. The draft covers 4 use cases: EST, Brewski, TEEP, and TEEP Brewski. But what I'm going to cover today is just a Brewski one. There's a couple of related drafts. So Refactories here is trying to figure out how to use Acme for issuing certs securely to client devices, which is exactly what Brewski does. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do here as well, is use Acme for issuing certs securely to client devices. So there's a bit of work required to align these two drafts and figure out how they work out together. Kathleen also has a draft published on using Acme for issuing client-side devices as well. So there's a bit of work required to figure out how these 3 things align. We have had some preliminary discussions. There is a side meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Anybody who's interested in trying to stitch together EST or Brewski and Acme, please attend this meeting tomorrow. So what I'm going to jump in through now is at a very, very high level how you can stitch Brewski and Acme together. So this is straight from the Acme specification. It's copied. These screenshots are taken directly from the Acme integrations draft. It just covers how a pledge or it covers how an EST RA can prove ownership of a parent domain using standard Acme procedures. So you can see the EST RA. The example I've given here is the EST RA is just proving ownership of domain.com. And it does that by publishing a DNS text record and then removing the text record once ownership is complete. And then this is where we jump into the Brewski thing. Now, this isn't the definitive full end-to-end Brewski flow. I've just shown the most relevant parts. I'm missing some of the messages, but that's fine. And so when the pledge boots up and the pledge has discovered the RA, the pledge requests a voucher. The RA will interact with the master server, get the voucher, and it'll be returned to the pledge. The pledge will then do a simple enroll, notwithstanding the previous presentation that Ali just made. The pledge will do a simple enroll and post a PKCS10, get back a 202 retry after. And then the RA will then turn around and talk in its backend to Acme to complete that order and get issued a signed certificate. One of the interesting things here for the Acme people, or the people who are familiar with Acme in the room, is that there's no challenges involved here. There's no interaction between the EST, RA, and DNS because there's no need to prove ownership of all the subdomain identifiers. And one thing that I've shown here is that the CSR that the pledge has generated has pledgeid.domain.com. So one thing that is not specified really in EST or on Brewski or on this draft here is how the pledge securely determines what domain to put in the CSR request. So once there's a second last slide here. So once the RA has obtained the certificate from Acme, and when the pledge then goes to re-enroll after whatever timeout was specified in the 202, the RA can then issue the cert to the pledge. And discussion is just a broader interest. Like, we are giving serious consideration to building this for some of our hardware endpoints. This short presentation was given on Acme. A similar one will be given at EMU tomorrow because this could be equally applicable to TEEP. And TEEP and its backend could turn around and use Acme to get issued a certificate. And again, the side meeting is tomorrow morning. So if you're interested, please attend. That is the last slide.
So my question isn't really about this, it's about Acme. I was kind of shocked into reality here. So a domain parent without any indication, notification of subdomains can always be issued certificates for any subdomain?
Acme allows this, yes. It'd be based on the CA policy, but Acme allows this, and this is how public CAs operate. You can prove ownership of, say, 4.com. Well, some CAs anyway. Your public CA, you prove ownership of 4.com, and the CA will happily issue you a certificate with an identifier for a subdomain of 4.com.
If you prove control of .com, can you be issued certificates for anything below?
No.
So
it's really, so if you read the browser CA, if you read the CA browser forum guidelines, it covers all this. And the CA browser forum guidelines today allow issuance of subdomain certs once you've proven ownership of a parent domain.
Michael, just to answer Doug's point, the way that you prove the control of the domain is such that you actually could, if you were challenged, prove control of any other name underneath that domain. And so Acme says, well, you proved your name is Doug. I don't need you to do anything else. You're you. You don't have to prove that your left leg is also your left leg and your right leg is your right leg. You're done. It's all of you. You've been authenticated, right? So that's the point. I'm unaware. I was a little bit vague on this point. Okay, it's interesting. It simplifies some code that I have. I'm not actually sure that Let's Encrypt actually does that right now. Okay.
It won't.
Pardon me? It won't. Right. So it's not implemented.
And there have been discussions with Let's Encrypt board to see whether they'll change your policy to do this, but
right. So that's what I said. So with the exception that I have to prove every name, so I do a DNS1 challenge each time. I actually have running code that does exactly what you're saying. Okay. As for how does the pledge get his name? Well, he does a get CSR attributes part. And in the ACP context, right, we had the discussion this morning about the RFC 822 name, which is generated in return. The pledge puts that in. Someone wants to use Brewski in another context, and they're going to have to decide what you just said. How does the pledge decide what the name is going to be there? And generally, the registrar is supposed to tell it what to put in its CSR, and that's an EST, right? So it's
well, I don't know whether it's fully specified. I was talking to Max about this, and he said,
it's not as well specified as you'd like, because it's kind of like, well, of course you would know in an EST context, because you authenticated the device or the thing, and you knew who the thing was, and you went to LDAP or something, or whatever. Well, you know what the name you're supposed to tell it to put in, and the device knows the name it's supposed to put in as well, or the endpoint knows that, because it authenticated with some other out-of-band mechanism. So it was all known by pre-configuration. And so now when we do this autonomically, now we have to say, ooh, we don't know it by pre-configuration, so we have to find something out. I'm not really real fond of this get CSR attributes, what it's called, CSR attributes return. It's made up. The AS1 is made up. It's the subject of one of the erratas about EST as to that someone thinks the AS1 is nonsense, and I had to implement it. I found it very difficult to figure out what was wrong, and I only really implemented it by changing my code until I produced the same output that the draft produced. Right, so the draft has an example. No idea how it really works because I couldn't understand the AS1, and so I just kept fixing my code, changing the nesting of sequences and sets until I got the same answer for the same inputs. At which point I think it's correct. But so that's good. The example is there. But I would be quite happy to have a completely different call that just gave you some JSON, and you went boom, and you're done, right? And that would probably work better with Acme, and maybe EMU would be happier with that too.
Or could it conceivably come in, I don't know. Yeah.
So some request, it's a new TEEP request, and you get back a little bit of JSON. It tells you RFC 822 name this thing, blah, 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 whatever. And I would be pleased and thrilled with that as well, to do that. So I think it's great work, and I'll be there tomorrow morning.
So I think I was lost in the sequence of events a little bit. So let me turn it around from the perspective of doing an ANI, enrolling devices with ACP certificates, so to speak, with this RFC 822 names. The model, how I understood Brewski so far, is that whatever protocol the registrar uses with the certificate authority, it would just have the however the RA is authenticating against the CA. That's fine. That's up to the protocol. And then that's basically all the authentication that's done on that link, which basically says that, exactly as Michael mentioned, CSR request all the stuff that figures out what should be in the certificate signing request. That's basically figured out between the RA and the client. And that thing then goes to the CA, and the CA simply signs off on that and says, yeah, fine, I'll give you everything you want because you're a trusted RA. I'm just trying to overemphasize what I thought to be the simple model. So I'm very suspicious now that this actually is the model of trust and verification, validation between the RA and the CA in this ACME case, or is it?
So you're saying that there's a trust relationship between the RA, like the actual API request itself is authenticated between the API, between the RA and.
That was my understanding also when talking long time ago now with Max, that basically you need, and that's also I think what I'll need to go back and figure out. I thought I'd been writing something about that in the ACP stuff, and I'm not quite sure, but that's my mental model of the model between the RA, ACP registrar, call it, and the CA, that the CA blindly trusts, so to speak, the RA to basically only send it, signing requests that the RA, because we've been basically coming from the premise that the backend from the RA to CA can use arbitrary protocols, and we don't want the CA to do anything new specifically for ANI, autonomic, right? So all this additional attribute crap that we're adding for the ACP is something the RA, which is an ACP registrar, should be aware of, control, and do the right thing with it, assign address field and so on, but the CA doesn't need to care about it.
I'm not entirely sure exactly what the succinct question is you're trying to ask me here, but
if I have an ACME CA, right, and I'm trying to apply the ANI use case, do I need any new code on the ACME CA?
Okay.
I think the answer is no to that.
The reason that Torlis is confused is because you're thinking that the ACME part changes the RA in some significant way, and it doesn't. All that's happening is that we have previously said that the registrar has a CA within it or connected to it. That's all we've said before. We've never assumed anything else. And Stefan is saying, and if that connection is ACME, this is what the whole story looks like. Okay, and there are perhaps unresolved at this point additional requirements on the pledge because of the interaction with ACME. Now that's the point. The point is that suddenly something has changed in the registrar. It's using ACME rather than something else, and now a third device, the pledge, has to change. Maybe not. Okay, and we're trying to establish that fact in this discussion.
The bit that's not entirely clear to me yet, because we haven't actually built this, is whether the pledge needs to do anything special in formatting the CSR to keep ACME happy.
Right.
Okay. And
but the RA should be happy.
What, for example, why are you suspicious?
Well, because ACME has specific requirements on the format of the domain and how you do domain challenges, which we're kind of changing a little bit with the subdomain stuff. But ACME has specific requirements on how you do domain challenges. And that means that the pledge must know exactly which domain to put in its CSR, and it must correspond to the domain that the RA has previously verified.
Right. And that's why earlier I said what was missing in his state diagram was the get CSR, because that actually provides the information the pledge probably needs. And if that's enough correct information, then we're okay.
But what
Elliot has just pointed out to me that I have something wrong in my CSRs because I'm missing the binding to the TLS channel in the CSR, and that's part of the issue. And that may actually affect it. ACME may be upset about the TLS unique that's supposed to be in there. So there may actually be some other issues that back and forth with that CSR. And it has to come from the pledge because we need it signed by the private key that's going to be attested to.
Right.
So if I try to translate this, then there is something like a domain stuff. There needs to be some authentication on that. If the pledge doesn't want to have very specific code on that, the RA would give it through the CSR attribute request to the client. The client then issues the signing request, and the ACME CA can be happy. Something around that?
We think that's how it might work, but we haven't worked out the details of whether that actually will keep ACME happy end to end.
And for tomorrow morning, you hopefully have also invited some people who might know?
Well, we've given this presentation at ACME, at Anima, and we're giving it at EMU tomorrow. So hopefully we'll have enough people coming who will be able to answer the questions. And the other thing we want to do is align with what REFAT is doing, which is a different slant on this, a different take on this, and a different take on how you might issue or use Acme to issue device-side certs.
So as a working group chair, the question in terms of what do you think, which working group might be best suited to take on this work and why?
So it may be that the way the draft is currently structured needs to be split apart, because the Acme issuance of subdomain certs is a very distinct thing that the Acme working group is happy to do and wants to do. But how you do the integration between Acme and Brewski or EST, that seems like it lives here.
Okay. And you mentioned others like TEEP and so on. I don't know who else has their own working group to worry about in this.
So given this presentation tomorrow as well, or a variant of this tomorrow at EMU, because if you look at the TEEP specification, TEEP covers how a supplicant can exchange PKC as 10s and 7s with a TEEP server, but that's it. It doesn't specify how the TEEP server interacts with the CA at all. Similar to Brewski, right?
So,
and there's a different set of domain challenges with TEEP than there is with Brewski, and we haven't looked at that at all yet.
So let me try to summarize. So you're thinking the Acme protocol stuff and what happens to the CA might be something for Acme, but they're not bothering about the finer details of mapping Acme in an RA into whatever other protocols the RA speaks. And that might be better here.
It might be better here, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And similar set of conversations will happen tomorrow at EMU. So it may be that, well, certainly the subdomain stuff probably warrants a draft on its own that Acme will take care of. And it may be that the Brewski and TEEP stuff require two separate documents. We do not know. Okay, that's it.
Right.
But is there general, so Michael, you said you're interested in this. Is there any other interested in this work?
Of course. I mean, why would we not want a standard, ANIMA registrar to CA connectivity? And if what you've been claiming is true, that Acme is the only thing that we have done in the IETF for that standard connection, then I think we should be interested. Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
So with 20 minutes to go, we actually finish all our agenda.
You wanted to do a dance or?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that's one of the cases we actually take, almost double time than we had normal in other IETF meeting, because this session, from the very beginning, we intentionally run ANIMA every IETF for 2 sessions, but normally the second session is for the, out of scope items. But this meeting, we actually giving the status, we have, the old charter and some potential work items for new charter. So we actually have 2 sessions. So we use that time very well. If you still want to do something, so still have time.
So Michael said, so thank you. Actually organized this really well. I wasn't sure I wanted to spend the whole day on ANIMA. I know you didn't decide when the sessions would be. It happened. And this room is smaller than I thought it was going to be. So thank you. You did really well, and actually it was really fun and pleasant. So I think that's a good model. But I hope we won't have any Brewski updates that next time. So
hopefully. All right, well done. Hopefully see you all in Singapore. Thank you.
Anybody who has not yet signed a blue sheet, please.
Blue sheets.
Right.
All right. Oh, well done. I'll hand in the blue sheets.
Well, there's still a bunch of mail, so the milestones need to be done. I need to send the email for Friday, for Thursday evening, and I need to try to catch some PKI experts.
Yeah. So you'll do the milestone.
Yeah, I'll start the milestones.
Okay. Sounds good.
That's not the Friday stuff is the most important. Then
Friday. For what?
The Thursday.
Yeah.
So then I think asking the PKI experts and the whole stuff will be
If we are done already.
Yeah.
Basically about the home for this actual document.
Right.
So first thing, I'm not against it. This is basically more your decision than mine.
I mean, we
accept
want to
that.
find the best working group. That doesn't mean anima, right? So that's why I was asking, right?
Exactly.
And I think I'm trying to be on top of the decision good enough so that we can have an opinion about that.
So from a perspective that they require certain extensions to Brewski as such, this
Right.
is the right place.
Right.
Yeah.
But how much it is extensions compared to actual usability, like they are derivative of that, right? So one suggestion, maybe it would be good that this is raised also to the security area. Well, this is for the office. This is not for you, but this is for the office.
So, right. So if I, as a normal working group chair, would like not to have work, right? So my question would be then to the admin chairs, how much of this whole proxy functionality